Hi, everybody, and welcome to our next recording. This is on Chapter 4, Writing Tips. Now, when you start to write your papers, proposals, whatever it is that you're writing, you need to have a general idea of how you want to structure your topic. And the structure really depends on the design. So you want to be really aware of how to write well, and you want to anticipate any ethical issues that might arise during your study. Now, the background of any proposal is going to kind of be a call to action, why we should care about this, what's the importance of this particular topic. So you really need to gather information and statistics and things that will support the rationale for the research study. What major points need to be addressed, and how can you convey a picture of the situation, the concern, the problem statement, so to speak. Now, here's some questions that as you develop your research proposals, you're going to want to think about. What do readers need to do to better understand about your topic? What do they need to know about your topic? What are you proposing to study? What's the setting and who will be in the study? How will you collect your data? How will you analyze your data? How will you validate the findings? What ethical concerns might be present? And what are the preliminary results going to say that can be used in the field? How can this actually help us in the field? Now, there's lots of different ways to do studies. We're going to be studying qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods research in this class. And so I wanted to give you some snapshots of what the different types of proposals make. When you're doing your research proposals, I really do encourage you to stay with either quantitative or qualitative. You're welcome to do mixed methods, but you will be doing basically two proposals in one because you need to provide all the information for both the quantitative and qualitative components of mixed methods. So it's really up to you, but it probably would make more sense to focus in on quantitative or qualitative, but if you want to do mixed methods, that's certainly an option. So I'm just going to scroll through these next two slides. These are in your text, and these really outline the core components of a proposal, in this case, a qualitative one from a constructivistic or interpretivistic format. This is from a social justice or transformative process. A quantitative format might include something that looks like this. And a mixed methods format would be a combination of the two. And when we look at mixed methods, we're going to see the different types of mixed methods, because it really depends on, is it quantitative and then qualitative? Is it qualitative and quantitative? Are they running simultaneously? What's the order of the methodology that's being used within the mixed methods? And here's an outline of a mixed methods. Now, when we're talking about writing, we need to use consistent terms throughout our proposal. This is so important. You know, if I say that I'm going to be researching adolescents who game, then I don't want to start talking about youth who play video games or youth who use social media. Those are different things. I want to make sure that my languaging is consistent so that throughout the research, my reader is very clear on who my subject is and what I'm studying. So I often say that research does not reward creativity. You really need to be very consistent, mundane, and repetitive with your language. So if you say you're studying adolescents, it should be adolescents throughout. Don't change it to youth, don't change it to teen, don't change it to young adult. Those are different categories of a population, and they're not exactly the same. If I say I'm going to be studying gaming, then I need to define or operationalize what gaming is, and I need to use that term consistently throughout my study. You know, is gaming just playing video games through an Xbox? Is gaming playing internet games? Is gaming using Steam? What does gaming include? And so you have to be very clear about what your terminology are, and this is called operationalizing your terms. So there's some ideas here that the authors talk about when we're guiding our reader. We want to have these kind of umbrella thoughts, which are our big core ideas. Like if I'm studying gaming, that would be a core idea. Big dots in that writing would be specific ideas. What type of gaming am I looking at? The little dots would reinforce those big dots. So what makes this type of gaming the type of gaming it is? And then attention and interest would be things that would help keep my reader on track and keep them engaged and interested in the ideas. Ultimately, there's a method to this madness, so to speak, in that everything is very well organized. I like to use the meal plan. And with the meal plan, what you do is you have a main idea in each paragraph. You have evidence to support that main idea. You have an analysis of the evidence that supports the main idea. And then you have something that links you to the next idea. Oftentimes I'll see paragraphs that are written with multiple ideas in it, and that can be very confusing to your readers. So you really want to analyze your own writing and make sure that each paragraph is a coherent idea, has an umbrella dot, has a big dot, has little dots, but that they're all tied together in some form of coherence that makes sense to your reader. Now, we want to talk about voice, tense, and fat when we're talking about writing. Eliminate unnecessary words. Fluff is not something that's really rewarded at a graduate level. There's no reason to pad your paper, so to speak. You want to make sure that you're speaking as concisely and as succinctly as you can. You also want to use active voice versus passive voice. So instead of saying the author or the article was written, you would say the author wrote the article. Now, APA format does not allow personifying inanimate objects anyway, so we would never say the article did anything, because the article is an inanimate object and it can't do anything. So the authors did this, the researchers did this, and even better than that would be to actually name the authors and name the researchers who did what they did. Make sure that you reduce overused phrases. One of the ones that I see very frequently that is not necessary is "it is something." So starting your sentence off with "it" is very kind of wordy and sometimes can be confusing to your reader because they don't know what it is. And so you want to make sure that you have the actual subject of your sentence at the beginning of the sentence and not some vague reference to something that isn't very clear, like "it is necessary that such and such." Well, what is it? Okay, there's no "it." Really, it is counselors need to, or researchers need to. So make sure that the actual subject of your sentence is at the beginning of it. We really don't want to see too many quotations, if any at all, actually, in your writing. What we're more interested in at the graduate level is your ability to read a pool of material and synthesize it into your own words. So we're really looking for more themes of the literature than your ability to tell us what each individual study did. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So really reduce those quotations and avoid contractions. Contractions should not be an academic work. So you shouldn't say the researcher can't do something. It would be the researcher cannot do something. And then, of course, as I mentioned, eliminating "it." And then "this" and "that," which are very vague. You know exactly what you're talking about when you write these words in your paper, but the reader, aka your professor, usually is rather confused. So you want to make sure that you try to eliminate. I would go as far as to search for those terms and try to eliminate them as much as possible. Okay. So just a little bit more about literature reviews. It is a critical first step that you know what your subject is, that you want to describe that in as few words. What's the central idea? If I'm researching, if I'm doing a literature review on, say, effective treatments for opioid addiction, then I want to make sure that I've operationalized my terms and I'm very clear on what I'm trying to understand. Maybe I'm looking for effective treatments for women who have children in their care, for example. So I need to really be able to zone in on research about that particular topic. And when I'm starting to think about a proposal, I need to think, okay, am I going to have access to that population? Am I going to have the resources necessary to collect from that population? And then will the research add to the knowledge of the field? Will scholars be interested in it? Will academics be interested in it? Will practitioners be interested in it? And how will it help me advance my goals and whatever those are? Now, when we are doing a literature review, we want to make sure that we know what type of paper we're going to write, because the type of paper that we're going to write is going to determine how much information we need to have. A research proposal is going to require less than a dissertation or a journal article. A journal article is going to have to be much, much more concise than a dissertation. So what type of writing you're doing is going to influence what you write. The idea is that you're going to provide a summary of the studies. Again, we are not talking about each study individually. When we look at your proposals and we look at the background of your proposals, we do not want to see one paragraph that talks about one study, and then the next paragraph talks about another study, and then the next paragraph talks about another study. We want to see themes that are in the literature, and we want those supported by multiple studies. So you're really looking at the literature as a whole and not as individual studies. You want to demonstrate that you know what the problem is and that you've integrated what others have talked about. Now, one of the things that's really important is that you look at literature that supports what you're talking about and what doesn't support what you're talking about, to be a very to be seen as a legitimate review. You need to provide both perspectives, because there's typically literature that is for and against things, and you need to provide that perspective of showing that you've looked at all the literature and not just using literature as a type of confirmatory bias to support your points. So you really want to look at what are the themes, what are the issues, what are the debates, the conflicts within the field about the area. You're going to identify specific keywords. Now, I tried to do some research not too long ago on what we call in the area that I live year-round schools, and I couldn't find any literature on year-round schools, and I knew that year-round schools was something that had been around, and it was something that people had, you know, talked about and dealt with and had looked at. And so it just took me a while where I had to keep searching and keep looking and trying to think about different ways that people might refer to a year-round school. And I'm trying to think what the actual term was that it ended up being, but it was something along the lines of a non-traditional or something like that, where, you know, I came across that term within an article and I was like, oh, that's a term. And I started searching by that term, and then I started to find more and more studies that were dealing with the type of school that I was interested in. So we really want to start very broad, and there are online encyclopedias that you can use that can help you with your broad search. These are not appropriate resources for your final resources for your articles and the papers that you're writing, but they're a good starting place, a place where you can get some ideas and see what terminology is being used. And then you can narrow it down into specific reviews. I do suggest, and people think I'm crazy when I say this, that you skim at least 50 articles if you're writing just a regular paper. In one of the major assignments in this class, we expect you to have anywhere from 10 to 12 primary resources that are current. You really do have to start with 50 to narrow it down to 10 to 12 good articles that you would use. And those need to be central to the topic or related to the topic. And we do recommend designing a kind of a literature map, which we've talked about in another recording as well. And then we're going to identify what the themes are. So, you know, as you're reading the articles and you come across an idea, you want to jot that idea down. And then when you go to article 2 and you're reading that article and you see, oh, they say the same thing, or maybe they say something slightly different, I'm going to make a note about that, about how they agree with or disagree with the theme that I noted in the first article. And eventually you'll build the synthesis where you have an understanding of the overall literature and not the individual studies, right? So it's important to organize it by concepts versus by studies. There's lots of wonderful computerized databases out there to help you. One of the ones that I am going to post a separate tutorial on is Google Scholar. I will show you how to use Google Scholar in a different one, but these databases are wonderful, and most libraries now allow you to search multiple databases at once. So you can do a multiple database search and look through many different ones. I do recommend keeping up with your keywords, keeping reference with the dates that you've studied, that you've looked at while you're doing your literature review. Keeping those notes will help you if you have to go back and find more studies. You'll know what you've already researched or studied or looked up. So keep a list of what you've already looked at and where. So I do recommend that you use Google Scholar and other academic libraries. Some faculty members aren't as big on Google Scholar, but I think that it does have a place in our research as long as you're a critical consumer and that you're paying attention and making sure that the articles that you're using from there are peer reviewed or from a governmental database. And you might want to go outside of the counseling field because we don't know everything within counseling. There's often ideas about topics that are of interest to us that are also talked about in other fields. And we will want to use databases that provide us with access to full articles. You can request articles through the library, but it sometimes takes a little bit of time to get those. And right now there's a really good accessibility to full articles, especially if you use a combination of your library and your research. If you use, sorry, if you use the databases available in the library plus Google Scholar, you can really get a good breadth of what's available. All right, some keywords to think about because you need to have a diversity of research methodologies in your research. In fact, when you do your annotated bibliography, you have to have 2 quantitative, 2 qualitative, and 2 mixed methods. So you're going to want to know what type of words to look for when you are looking for your literature. So I've given you some words here for quantitative and qualitative. Of course, the combination of these would mean mixed methods. And we're going to do an exercise in class that will help with that too. Now, remember, age matters. A lot of times students want to push back on the fact that we require that articles be within 10 years or less. There's one exception, of course, if you're using what's called a seminal article, something that's really viewed as a primary article about a particular topic. If I was doing a research article on person-centered theories, of course, Dr. Rogers' books and articles would be important. But overall, age does really, really matter. And I wanted to explain to you how research is published because I think it might help you understand why we push the 10 years so much. So let's say that I collected some research data in 2005. I go out into the field, in the community, I collect data, I bring that data back, and it's 2005. Well, by the time I get around to writing up my article, it's probably going to be 2006, maybe even 2007. I'm going to then submit my article to the journal for review. Most journal reviews take anywhere from 6 months to 18 months. So now we've gone from 2007 to 2009. Okay, I have some revisions on my article. So I have to revise my article and send it back. Let's say it's still 2009. I get it in before the end of the year. So they publish my article in 2010. Now, remember, the data that I collected was from 2005. So when I publish that article in 2010 and you use it in 2020, it's 10 years old as an article, but the data is actually 15 years old. And that is so frequent. I mean, that's how the process works. So you have to really understand that when you use that 10-year-old article, chances are the data that's being talked about in that article is 12 to 15 years old. So we ideally want our articles to be 5 years or less. So it's more likely that the data is 10 years or less. Because let's face it, our society is changing so quickly, so rapidly, that we really need to have the most current data. I can tell you that as a breast cancer survivor myself, that I want my doctors to use the most current research available. If my doctor came in and said, you know, we found this article, one article, and it was written in 2005, and we really think that we should try this treatment, I'm going to be a little hesitant because that is not current research. That is research that's almost 20 years old. And I don't want my doctor using that type of research on me. I want the most current knowledge. I want the most current information that's available to inform my treatment. And we owe that to our clients as well. We want to use the most current research available to inform our practices, because what we do does matter and people's lives are at stake. We have to use the most current information to make the best and most ethical decisions we can make for our clients. So age does matter. And then a literature map, like I said, is a visual summary. There's lots of different ways to do it. There's different models. I went over those in another recording, so I hope that's helpful. I do just want to remind everybody that a literature review is a lot like a cocktail party, right? You invite everybody over, everybody's talking, and at the end of the party, your friend asks you, hey, how did the party go? You're not going to tell them what every individual person said. You're going to summarize what the themes were, who agreed with what, and you're going to group people together in that way. And that's a lot like a literature review. So remember, synthesis, the themes, that's what a literature is about. It is not about reporting on individual studies. It's about reporting on the themes that the literature tells us about a particular topic. All right, I hope that's been helpful, and if you have any questions, let us know in class.